They cuffed me right there, in my own driveway, my sanctuary, while half the neighborhood peeked through their blinds, pretending they weren't watching. Tuso called police officers with shiny, new badges dragged me toward their cruiser, shouting something about unpaid HOA fees and felony-level property damage. The smell of charred barbecue sauce hung heavy in the air, mixing with the bitter sting of humiliation. What was supposed to be a quiet Saturday cookout had turned into a twisted public spectacle. My 16th-year-old daughter, Sage, stood frozen on the porch, tears streaking her face, watching her father get treated like a criminal. The steel of the handcuffs cut into my skin as they slammed me against the patrol car. Except this wasn't an official vehicle, and those weren't real cops. Because here's where the story flips. I'm Chief Garrett Blackwood. Yes, that Chief Blackwood, who's worn the badge in this town for 12 years. The men arresting me were hired actors, part of an elaborate scheme by our drunk HOA president. Cordelia Pimpton Hayes thought she was teaching me a lesson, but what she really did was write her own confession in real time. I didn't fight back. I didn't flash my badge. I let her dig the deepest hole possible, because sometimes revenge isn't about pulling the trigger. It's about letting your enemy aim at their own feet. Tell me, what would you do if fake cops stormed your driveway? Stick around, because every homeowner needs to hear how this nightmare began. 6 months ago, I wasn't at war with anyone. I was a broken widower trying to start over. After watching my wife Marina lose her battle with cancer, 18 brutal months of hospital lights, soft apologies, and fading strength, I needed peace. Marina had spent her last days flipping through real estate magazines, circling dream houses we'd never move into. So when she passed, I used her life insurance to buy one of them, a perfect home in Willowbrook Estates. 23 years of marriage reduced to a down payment. The only piece of light left in my world was Sage, my daughter, who stayed with me on weekends. We built memories under the glow of garage lights, fixing up Marina's 1967 Mustang convertible. The smell of oil and her vanilla perfume, mixed with the thrum of classic rock, turning grief into something bearable, if only for a few hours. Then came day 3. The dream cracked. 3 violation notices appeared taped to my front door like ransom letters. Grass too tall by less than an inch. Mailbox color off by 1 shade. Apparently. Charcoal black. Wasn't midnight black. Garbage cans visible for exactly 4 minutes after pickup. I actually timed it with my police stopwatch. That's how ridiculous it was. I laughed at first, thinking it was some rookie cop hazing me. I wasn't laughing long, because that's when I met her. Cordelia Pimpton Hayes, the self-crowned empress of Willowbrook. Imagine a woman who could terrify a room without raising her voice. Silver hair pulled back, so tight it looked painful, pearl earrings sharp enough to draw blood, and a stare that measured your worth before your words. She drove her white Mercedes SUV like a patrol unit, vanity plate RAL ES1. Her home was a fortress, floodlights, imported gravel driveway, and landscapers working around the clock to maintain her illusion of perfection. The first real clash came at the monthly HOA meeting. I questioned a $500 fine for commercial activity, because I'd changed my truck's oil in my own driveway. Cordelia's voice could have frozen lava. Mr. Blackwood, perhaps you don't understand. We maintain standards here. 20 neighbors avoided eye contact like scared schoolchildren. That's when I realized. These weren't residents. They were inmates in Cordelia's perfectly manicured prison. After the meeting, sweet old Mrs. Chen whispered to me about what really happened to those who defied Cordelia. 2 families had lost their homes. foreclosed after bogus fines piled up faster than anyone could pay. It wasn't management, it was extortion wearing lipstick and pearls. I bought this house to honor my wife, to heal with my daughter. Instead, I'd walked straight into a suburban dictatorship, and Cordelia just declared war. Enhanced enforcement begins immediately, she announced, eyes locked on mine. Some residents, she said, needed stronger encouragement. She had no idea who she'd just threatened. By week 2, hell had become routine. Each sunrise brought new violation letters tucked under my door. My truck's back tire was 6 inches too far left. 200 fine. Porch bulb wattage too high. 300 fine. Garden hose wound the wrong direction. 500 fine. I wish I was joking. I'd spend 12-hour shifts dealing with real crimes, armed robberies, domestic abuse, human pain, and come home to find fake tickets for existing. Cordelia's kingdom wasn't about order. It was about domination. Then came the morning everything shifted. I was sipping burnt coffee, watching Mrs. Chen prune her late husband's roses, when I saw movement. Golf carts. Not the normal kind retirees use. These had flashing amber lights, decals, and men in matching polo uniforms. They were photographing homes, measuring lawns, and noting car placements with military precision. My instincts screamed surveillance operation. I grabbed binoculars and watched as they patrolled every street, documenting violations. It wasn't random. It was targeted. Cordelia had created her own miniature police force, a private militia enforcing her personal code. She'd even given them fake badges. That's when my training as a cop kicked in. I fired up my laptop and began digging through HOA statutes. Within minutes, my blood pressure hit the roof. Every notice Cordelia issued included a $75 processing fee. But under state law, administrative costs were capped at actual expenses, usually no more than $1.25 to $1.50. Cordelia was stealing hundreds of dollars per citation, multiplied across 200 houses. The math made me sick. This wasn't poor management. It was white-collar theft. Organized crime with a neighborhood newsletter. That weekend, Sage came over for our usual Mustang restoration ritual. She noticed my exhaustion before I said a word. "Dad," she asked softly, "why don't you just arrest her?" I smiled, tightening a bolt on the carburetor. "Can't abuse my badge, kiddo. The law doesn't work like that." But her question lingered, echoing like an alarm. What if Cordelia was committing real crimes? That thought snapped everything into focus. Monday morning, I started my quiet counterattack. I compiled every fraudulent notice, every illegal fee, every resident's testimony I could find. Then, using my home office and badge access, I filed formal reports with the State Attorney General's Office and Consumer Fraud Division. The game was changing, and this time, it was my move. Cordelia Pimpton Hayes had built her empire on fear. She had no idea that beneath her nose, the man she tried to humiliate was building her downfall one piece of evidence at a time. And before it was over, she'd learned that the real law doesn't bow to fake badges or self-appointed queens of suburbia. When I reached out to the city's building permits department about Cordelia's self-appointed golf cart patrol, the truth hit like a sledgehammer. They weren't registered, licensed, or insured to operate anything, let alone issue citations. Their so-called authority had no legal standing beyond Cordelia's imagination. The illusion of control she'd built was crumbling. And the moment word started spreading, the neighborhood began to stir. Quietly, dangerously. Like a sleeping dragon coming alive after years of oppression. That Tuesday evening, Mrs. Chen cornered me at my mailbox, her hands trembling with bottled-up fury. "Chief Blackwood," she whispered, eyes darting around as though we were plotting an escape. They fined me $2,000 for Harold's Memorial Garden. They said the roses violated landscape symmetry. Harold planted those roses for our anniversary 40 years ago. Her voice cracked on the last word. That conversation shattered something inside me. This wasn't about rules anymore. Cordelia was waging psychological warfare against the weak. The grieving, the elderly, the ones too tired or afraid to fight back. But my quiet investigation was making her paranoid. I'd catch glimpses of her white Mercedes idling at the end of my driveway during odd hours. Headlights off, engine whispering. Surveillance. She knew someone was unraveling her empire, but couldn't pinpoint who. The neighborhood's soundscape shifted overnight, from chirping birds to the low mechanical growl of golf carts prowling at dawn. Citation papers slid under doors like silent threats wrapped in legal jargon. That was when I decided Cordelia Pimpton Hayes was about to learn that not everyone bows under pressure, especially not a man who's already buried half his heart and has nothing left to lose but his wife's final dream. Her next strike came masked as community improvement. Week 3 brought the ultimate financial ambush. A special assessment fee of $1,500 per household for emergency infrastructure upgrades. No meeting minutes. No contractor records. No justification. Just a deadline and a warning: pay or face property liens. It was theft wearing a professional smile. But she wasn't done. Thursday evening, after a full day tracking suspects in a real armed robbery, I came home to find a cease and desist order glued, literally glued, to my garage door. Apparently, working on the Mustang with Sage now violated residential only use. Cordelia demanded I remove all automotive equipment immediately or pay a $5,000 fine for operating an unauthorized commercial garage. That garage wasn't a workspace. It was sacred ground. It smelled of oil and loss and laughter. It was where Sage and I rebuilt pieces of Marina's spirit with every spark plug, every polished chrome curve. And Cordelia wanted to bulldoze it. That was her mistake. That night, standing in the glow of the garage light, surrounded by my wife's tools and my daughter's laughter still echoing in memory, something hardened inside me. This wasn't professional duty anymore. It was personal war. As I scrolled through Cordelia's latest violation photos under fluorescent light, one detail froze my blood reflections. Tiny glints in the windows she photographed, reflections of a telephoto lens pointed straight into my kitchen. She wasn't just documenting. She was spying. I grabbed my phone and called Detective Riley Thornton, a trusted friend and one of the best surveillance experts I knew. 20 years in the field. A man who despised predators who targeted families. After reviewing the evidence, he didn't mince words. "Chief, that's criminal stalking. You're looking at federal privacy violations dressed up as HOA policy. Want me to help bury this queen of suburbia?" Together, Riley and I turned my property into a counter-surveillance zone. Hidden cameras, motion sensors, timed audio logs, professional, grade equipment. Within 48 hours, we had crystal-clear proof Cordelia herself, crouched behind shrubs, photographing residents through their windows. Private driveways, backyards, illegal entry, felony trespass, harassment. Every act captured in perfect, prosecutable clarity. But the real jackpot came when we analyzed her golf cart patrols. The officers were issuing citations on public streets. Territory strictly reserved for law enforcement. Every single ticket they wrote counted as impersonating police, a felony punishable by prison time. Cordelia's empire of fake authority was built on criminal acts she didn't even understand. My findings sparked something across the community. A quiet resistance movement. Mrs. Chen wasn't whispering anymore. She was rallying. She introduced me to others who'd been targeted. Hank Morrison, a retired veteran fined for improper flag display. His American flag, creased from military funerals, was deemed unsightly. Jasper and Dakota Williams, young parents fined $800 because their toddler's chalk art on the sidewalk violated aesthetic codes. Sidewalk chalk. A 3-year-old's rainbow. $800. The rage building in me felt volcanic. Then came my own final notice. A bright red envelope waiting on my porch. $3,200 in accumulated fines. 8 months of 400 payments or foreclosure proceedings. They wanted the house Marina dreamed of. The home I'd bought with her life insurance. My last living connection to her. That night, as I inhaled the familiar scent of WD-40 and paint thinner in the garage, I made my decision. This wasn't going to court. This was going down in history. Riley and I installed hidden cameras around the neighborhood. Not just mine, Mrs. Chen's, the Morrisons, the Williams. Within a week, we had hours of footage. Cordelia's enforcers trespassing, taking photos through curtains, recording license plates. Clear as day. Irrefutable evidence. I reached out to the district attorney's HOA fraud task force, a division I'd worked with before. Their verdict chilled me. Cordelia's special assessments were more than unethical. They were felonies. Theft by deception, racketeering, wire fraud. If the funds weren't used as claimed, she was legally stealing from homeowners. The very laws she used to intimidate others were now the rope she'd hang herself with. Every dawn brought the same chilling sound. The metallic click of her camera shutters. The noise echoed like a hunter marking prey. But what she didn't realize was that every photo she took became another piece of evidence. Every illegal fine, every privacy breach, another nail in her legal coffin. Cordelia thought she was breaking a grieving widower. What she didn't realize was that she'd awakened a cop who'd spent his life dismantling criminal networks. A man whose grief had burned away fear, leaving only precision and purpose. I wasn't just building a case anymore. I was orchestrating her downfall. By week 4, Cordelia's mask started to crack. Her Mercedes now prowled faster, erratic. She hired real private investigators to dig into residents' lives, desperate for leverage. Background checks, surveillance, blackmail material. Her fear had metastasized into chaos. Then came the official threat, certified mail, cold and clinical. My home would be leaned within 72 hours for non-payment of $4,800 in fines. Only this time, she'd overplayed her hand. Because her arrogance wasn't just her weapon. It was her fatal flaw. And when the reckoning came, I was going to make sure it happened in daylight, with the entire neighborhood watching. When her private investigators finally uncovered my real identity, logic should have told Cordelia to vanish. Any criminal with an ounce of self-preservation would have run for the hills. But Cordelia Pimpton Hayes wasn't wired for logic. When she realized she'd been waging war against the actual police chief, she didn't retreat. She escalated. What came next wasn't defiance. It was delusion. She launched a new phase of psychological and legal warfare so calculated it exposed just how far her sociopathic ambition could reach. The woman genuinely believed she could outmaneuver a cop. Her next move confirmed she'd officially slipped her tether to reality. Cordelia announced a series of compliance hearings for every resident who had dared to defy her. These weren't real hearings. They were public trials of humiliation. She handpicked her HOA board loyalists to act as judge, jury, and executioner. Her letters carried the same legal venom as court summonses, dripping with arrogance and thinly veiled threats. Noncompliance, she warned, meant immediate foreclosure proceedings. Mrs. Chen received her notice the same morning as Hank Morrison and the Williams family. The message was simple and terrifying. Either kneel before the throne of Cordelia Pimpton Hayes, or watch everything you own vanish into foreclosure paperwork. While she staged her theatrical inquisition, I was constructing something far more lethal. A federal case. I'd been working quietly with the district attorney's financial crimes unit through secure back channels. Together, we unearthed something explosive. Cordelia had been embezzling HOA funds for more than 2 years. The so-called emergency assessments she demanded for community repairs were actually financing her private accounts scattered across 3 states. Every dollar extracted from residents' fear was being laundered through personal bank accounts she controlled. This wasn't mismanagement. It was organized theft with a manicure. My federal training kicked in. Everything about Cordelia's operation matched the textbook definition of white-collar fraud, fabricated infractions, extortion disguised as administrative fees, intimidation of witnesses, falsified financial records. She wasn't managing a neighborhood. She was running a suburban criminal syndicate under the cover of HOA bylaws. She'd scheduled my compliance hearing as the finale of her power play. Her example, to scare everyone back into submission. She even circulated whisper campaigns about my supposed mental instability. After Marina's death, accusing me of being unfit for duty and hinting at alcoholism. Total fiction, crafted to discredit me before she tried to ruin me publicly. But fate had other plans, and her undoing came from the last person she'd ever expect. That Saturday evening, Sage was helping me organize files in the garage, surrounded by the familiar smell of oil and dust, her hair tied back like her mother used to do. Under the flicker of fluorescent lights, she began comparing violation notices, 3 at a time, arranging them like puzzle pieces on the hood of the Mustang. "Dad," she said suddenly, her voice sharp with realization, "these codes don't exist. None of them are in the HOA charter." I froze. Then the truth hit like a lightning strike. Cordelia had invented entire rule codes, dozens of them, to justify fake violations. When I cross-referenced her notices with the official HOA documents, 60% were completely fabricated. My daughter had just exposed the blueprint of Cordelia's criminal empire. I spent the next 48 hours dissecting every photo, every citation, every signature. That's when another horror emerged. Cordelia's enforcers weren't just taking photos anymore. They were breaking into backyards, slipping through side gates at dawn, staging evidence, and photographing infractions that didn't exist. Our quiet neighborhood had become a crime scene. Then came the knockout discovery. While tracing corporate filings, I found that Cordelia had never legally filed her HOA board elections with the State Corporation Commission. That meant her entire authority, every fine, every citation, every ruling, was void. She wasn't a governing official. She was a glorified con artist who'd tricked 200 homeowners into believing she held power she never legally possessed. I began reaching out to nearby jurisdictions and investigators in neighboring counties, sharing intelligence about the fake enforcement patterns. The response was instant and chilling. Similar complaints were emerging from 3 other communities, all using identical letter formats, identical fee structures, identical signatures. The same ghost of Cordelia Pimpton Hayes lurked behind every one of them. What we were looking at wasn't isolated HOA corruption. It was an interstate criminal enterprise masquerading as community management. My nights turned into strategy sessions at the station. I'd pour another cup of burnt coffee, Stack another file on the growing mountain of evidence, and watch the case build itself like a slow motion avalanche. Each binder thickened with financial records, photographic proof, and victim statements. The smell of stale caffeine and toner became my new comfort. Every document I added was another nail in Cordelia's legal coffin. The woman who'd threatened to destroy my family's last connection to Marina was about to meet a prosecutor's dream defendant. A fraudster with a paper trail longer than her list of enemies. Then came the moment everything broke open. 2:47 a.m., Tuesday morning. I was half asleep at my kitchen table, surrounded by coffee rings, paperwork, and exhaustion. I'd been poring through bank statements when my eyes caught something odd. Signature inconsistencies. I zoomed in, compared them side by side, and my pulse spiked. They were forged. Dozens of them. 2 years' worth of falsified documents authorizing transfers that legitimate board members had never seen, much less signed. It wasn't just embezzlement. It was large-scale financial forgery spanning multiple institutions and jurisdictions. As I followed the paper trail, the scale of her theft came into horrifying focus. Over 200,000 siphoned from community accounts through shell corporations, fake LLCs, and interstate wire transfers. Cordelia had engineered a white-collar heist beneath everyone's noses, laundering money through property improvement, budgets that never built a single brick. It was a masterpiece of criminal architecture disguised as administrative order. And for the first time, I understood her motive. Digging into her financial past revealed that her real estate business had collapsed years earlier during the housing crash. Bankruptcy, lawsuits, reputation in shambles. That's when she reinvented herself. Not as a homeowner, but as a predator hiding behind HOA titles. She infiltrated neighborhood boards, staged power grabs, and used foreclosure loopholes to seize homes cheap and flip them for profit. Every HOA she controlled was another personal gold mine. It wasn't mismanagement. It was calculated plunder. The final revelation made my skin crawl. While tracing her purchases, I discovered online transactions for replica police badges, uniform insignias, and ID cards, professional, grade fakes bought from security suppliers. She wasn't just impersonating authority, she was manufacturing it. Her fake police force wasn't a metaphor. She'd built it piece by piece, buying her own army of imitation enforcers. Cordelia Pimpton Hayes had declared war on her own neighbors. But now the battlefield had shifted. Because for the first time, she wasn't playing against frightened homeowners. She was up against a cop who specialized in dismantling criminal organizations. And this time, she was going to lose everything. Her so-called compliance patrol wasn't just crossing ethical lines. It was shattering federal law. These weren't overzealous volunteers enforcing law and height. They were criminals impersonating police officers to terrorize homeowners into surrendering cash for fake violations. Their crimes stacked like a prosecutor's dream indictment: wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, interstate theft, document forgery, and full-blown impersonation of law enforcement. Cordelia had built herself a felony pyramid, one fraudulent brick at a time. The day the district attorney called to say the FBI's white-collar division was officially involved, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Vindication. Because when federal agents start drooling over an HOA case, you know it's no longer a neighborhood dispute. It's organized crime hiding behind picket fences. The revelation that broke my final shred of optimism came from revisiting the property seizure records. Under Cordelia's reign, 12 families had lost their homes over 3 years. 12 innocent families stripped of generational security through forged documents, illegal violations, and manipulated foreclosure proceedings. What I once thought were random victims turned out to be part of a systematic cleansing operation. Her strategy was horrifyingly precise. Fabricate enough debt, threaten legal ruin, and seize the property when people inevitably broke. That was her profit model. Mrs. Chen's so-called $2,000 landscape noncompliance fee suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't about grass or shrubs. It was a chess move to force foreclosure, so Cordelia could quietly take her home, flip it, and pocket the gains. The memorial garden her late husband had planted, the one with the rose bushes that bloomed every anniversary, had been targeted for profit. That evening, as twilight brushed gold against the horizon and the fragrance of Harold's roses floated through the air, Mrs. Chen dropped the truth that redefined the entire investigation. "Chief Blackwood," she said, her tone sharper than I'd ever heard it. "I need to tell you something. I wasn't just a schoolteacher. I spent 3 decades as a federal prosecutor specializing in corporate fraud." My breath caught. She continued calmly, "I've been documenting everything. Every financial irregularity, every fake code, every illegal foreclosure, for the past 8 months. You're not alone in this anymore." In that instant, the entire dynamic shifted. I was no longer a grieving widower defending my daughter's memory and my wife's sanctuary. I had just become the lead investigator in a multi-jurisdictional criminal enterprise, with a retired federal prosecutor as my partner. Mrs. Chen brought an arsenal of legal precision honed over 30 years of tearing apart white-collar criminals. Together, we formed something Cordelia had never encountered before: informed, coordinated, and fearless opposition. We weren't just angry homeowners. We were a federal nightmare dressed in suburban calm. Within 48 hours, my garage transformed into what looked like the operations center of a federal task force. The same space where Sage and I had rebuilt Marina's Mustang was now lined with corkboards, financial flowcharts, and surveillance stills. Colored string connected bank accounts, property transfers, and insurance claims. The comforting scent of motor oil mixed with the bitter aroma of overbrewed coffee as Mrs. Chen and I worked in relentless silence. What we were assembling wasn't just evidence. It was a case file that would dismantle an empire. Our team grew fast. Detective Riley Thornton joined first, my trusted colleague and surveillance expert. He'd lost patience with HOA tyrants long ago and brought a tactical mindset to our operation. Then came Hank Morrison, our decorated veteran neighbor, who organized residents like a platoon. He built defensive protocols, coordinated communication systems, and taught families how to legally document harassment. County DA investigator Marcus Webb, already knee-deep in financial crimes, brought analytical expertise and access to inter-agency databases. Together, our ragtag neighborhood transformed into a covered enforcement unit. The trap we built was elegant in its simplicity. We let Cordelia walk right into it. She was planning to stage one of her compliance arrests. Fake officers, imitation badges, flashing lights, the full illusion of authority. What she didn't know was that every inch of my property was now under professional-grade surveillance. We had hidden microphones in bird feeders, cameras in porch lights, and live feeds streaming to unmarked FBI vehicles parked discreetly along the block. The Bureau was practically giddy. After years of chasing faceless digital scammers, they had a flesh and blood suburban queenpin on tape preparing to commit multiple federal crimes in real time. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chen's federal contacts fast-tracked search warrants. By the time Cordelia's crew was rehearsing their mock raid, federal agents were ready to simultaneously execute raids at her residence, her business office, and 2 banks holding the stolen HOA funds. Every signature she'd ever forged was waiting to be matched to falsified ledgers and shell corporations. Over late night Chinese takeout and lukewarm coffee, Mrs. Chen outlined the strategy that would make this airtight. "Federal statutes are beautiful," she said, grinning for the first time in months. "They don't care about petty excuses. Cordelia can't plea her way out when she's committed this many felonies." Her experience was razor sharp. She knew which charges stacked for maximum sentencing: wire fraud, insurance fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, document falsification, and impersonation of law enforcement. Each one carried serious federal time. Together, they formed a legal death sentence, but our operation wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoration. I'd seen too many families lose everything to predators like her. We set up a pro bono legal support network through local firms willing to take on fraud victims. Marcus Webb coordinated with my department's community outreach division to launch a small but powerful victim assistance fund. Its purpose: to help residents recover stolen money, contest fraudulent foreclosures, and rebuild their lives without drowning in legal fees. Then came Mrs. Chen's most devastating find yet: the insurance scam. Cordelia had been filing bogus insurance claims in the names of multiple HOAs, pocketing settlement checks for fake, storm damage, and community repairs. That discovery turned her financial crimes into something far deadlier: insurance fraud, especially when conducted across state lines, carries mandatory federal sentencing guidelines. It wasn't a question of if she'd go to prison. It was a question of how many decades she'd serve before parole eligibility even appeared on the horizon. I've spent a lifetime in law enforcement, but I'd never seen someone dig their own grave this efficiently. Every certified letter she mailed carried automatic federal mail fraud exposure. Every electronic transaction across state lines became wire fraud. Every fake badge, every intimidation threat, every falsified document added layers of sentencing years. She'd built her own prison one form at a time. Our garage looked like the inside of a federal evidence vault. Rows of labeled boxes, digital backups, sworn affidavits, time-stamped footage. The deeper we dug, the more monstrous the scale of her crimes became. This wasn't a neighborhood drama anymore. It was a full-blown federal investigation. And when justice came, it wouldn't knock politely. It would kick her front door down at dawn. Cordelia Pimpton Hayes thought she'd mastered manipulation. But now, every move she made was being watched by people who wrote the laws she broke. The woman who once weaponized bureaucracy was about to learn what it felt like to be crushed by it. Every counterfeit badge order left a digital trail: timestamps, receipts, and credit card transactions that painted an unbroken map of Cordelia's crimes. Forensic analysts traced every purchase to her accounts, while handwriting experts, veterans of federal court testimony, confirmed that the signatures scattered across her forged documents all came from the same arrogant hand. Each stolen dollar, once invisible, now pulsed under forensic accounting scrutiny that would have impressed agents from the U.S. Treasury. The plan demanded precision. We needed Cordelia to stage her theatrical arrest, while federal surveillance captured every unlawful act in perfect clarity. It had to unfold naturally, with no suspicion of entrapment. The moment she crossed the final legal line, her empire would collapse under the weight of irrefutable evidence. But justice wasn't only about punishment. It was about healing a community that had lived under tyranny. We began holding open neighborhood meetings, giving frightened residents a voice again. Stories poured out: tears, outrage, relief. Slowly, fear began to dissolve into solidarity. Plans formed for a massive neighborhood gathering once the storm passed. A block celebration to reclaim what Cordelia had stolen: peace, safety, and dignity. Amid the late nights and endless casework, I found my purpose sharpening into diamond clarity. This was no longer about saving my home or defending Marina's memory. It was about honoring the principle she lived by: that good people cannot surrender when evil masquerades as authority. The same garage where Marina once dreamed of building a family workshop now thrummed with quiet vengeance as her husband plotted the end of a criminal empire built on deceit. That night, the scent of machine oil mingled with the metallic bite of determination. Mrs. Chen sat across from me, legal pads stacked like ammunition, as we reviewed every final detail of the prosecution. Our timeline was airtight. Every witness was briefed, every exhibit cataloged, every statute cross referenced with its corresponding evidence. What once had been Marina's haven of creativity now glowed with purpose. A sanctuary transformed into the heart of justice for 12 families who'd lost everything to Cordelia's greed. Cordelia Peyton Hayes believed she was unstoppable, that she'd cowed an entire community into silent obedience. She had no idea that behind garage doors and quiet living rooms, her victims had united, led by professionals who understood how to dismantle monsters like her with surgical precision. Then her paranoia mutated into open madness. Once she confirmed my identity as the city's police chief, she should have disappeared into the shadows like any criminal with self-preservation instincts. Instead, she decided to wage total war. Her next campaign was a blend of character assassination and psychological warfare, designed to destroy my credibility before the courts could destroy hers. She filed official complaints with state investigators, claiming I'd abused my position to threaten innocent citizens. According to her reports, I was a grief-crazed cop misusing his badge to settle personal vendettas. It was a grotesque inversion of truth. Cordelia accusing me of the very sins she'd committed with impunity. But the paper attacks were only the beginning. Her loyal enforcers escalated to physical intimidation, staging nocturnal vandalism, raids that plunged our once idyllic neighborhood into chaos. They shattered porch lights, slashed garden hoses, and sabotaged irrigation systems. Mrs. Chen's cherished memorial garden, her last connection to her husband, was drowned when someone smashed the sprinkler lines. Hank Morrison awoke to find his driveway littered with garbage and his flagpole bent in half. The Williams family found their mailbox splintered to pieces, followed hours later by a 600 citation for damaged community infrastructure. It was psychological warfare, masked as code enforcement. Each sunrise brought new destruction followed by new fines slipped beneath front doors like ransom notes. When intimidation didn't work, Cordelia shifted to bribery. She sent carefully chosen intermediaries, people she thought I might trust, with an offer of $10,000 to quietly move out, for the good of the neighborhood. When that failed, she threatened to ruin my reputation through her political allies and media contacts. Within days, local journalists were running sympathetic stories about a concerned HOA president being harassed by a mentally unstable police chief. She turned my grief into a weapon, painting Marina's death as the cause of my supposed breakdown. Seeing my wife's memory twisted into propaganda nearly broke me. Mrs. Chen stopped me from making the mistake Cordelia wanted. Emotional reaction. Let her talk, she advised, eyes cold with prosecutorial experience. Every lie she tells becomes another piece of evidence. She's writing her own confession one quote at a time. Meanwhile, the FBI's investigation reached critical mass. Financial subpoenas produced a flood of data, wire transfers, fake invoices, shell corporations, all pointing to Cordelia's expanding panic. Yet instead of cutting her losses, she did the opposite. Her delusion of control became totalitarian. She declared what she called a community security emergency, effectively imposing martial law within our subdivision. Her patrols began performing unauthorized safety inspections, breaking into yards and photographing private belongings. Residents caught them snooping behind fences, eavesdropping on conversations, even peering through windows with telephoto lenses. Spray paint markers appeared overnight, strange symbols scrawled on targeted homes. An intimidation code only her enforcers understood. Golf carts prowled the streets at dawn, engines humming like insects, their riders snapping photos and jotting notes like reconnaissance teams in enemy territory. But every illegal action only tightened the noose. Each trespass, each photograph, each false citation was captured by the hidden cameras Riley had installed across the community. We logged timestamps, compiled reports, and cross-referenced every act with corresponding federal statutes: witness intimidation, conspiracy to commit burglary, civil rights violations under color of authority, harassment across state lines. Cordelia was burying herself alive in evidence. Her ultimate collapse began with the emergency declaration. In a desperate bid to justify her escalating crimes, she claimed militant residents were plotting violence against her administration. This fiction gave her an excuse to seize more control. Expedited foreclosures, warrantless searches, new fees. To fund her so-called security initiatives. According to her official memo, normal homeowners had transformed into domestic terrorists. But she didn't realize every move was being broadcast in real time to a federal task force. My surveillance system recorded every meeting, every command, every false justification. From the moment she signed that fabricated emergency order, she transformed her petty extortion into full-blown federal tyranny. And this time, the neighborhood wasn't afraid. We were waiting, with cameras rolling and the FBI listening. Cordelia Peyton Hayes, who once believed herself untouchable behind legal jargon and intimidation, was about to learn the hard way what happens when power meets accountability and when justice comes armed with federal law. Her private patrol units had turned into roaming criminals, conducting unlawful searches, trespassing into homes under the pretense of community inspection. Her so-called maintenance crews became vandals after dark, destroying fences, defacing mailboxes, and spreading fear with every shattered window. Her intimidation teams, often wearing imitation uniforms, cornered elderly residents, warning them they'd lose their homes unless they obeyed her commands. When I finally presented the entire body of evidence to the mayor and my department's senior officers, the reaction was immediate and decisive. After reviewing every affidavit, recording, and forensic audit, city leadership acknowledged that Cordelia wasn't just a manipulative HOA president. She was the architect of a criminal network disguised as neighborhood governance. The mayor's televised statement became the spark that changed everything. Chief Blackwood has our administration's unwavering confidence, he said. His ongoing investigation has exposed widespread criminal deception operating under the appearance of local management. We stand behind him fully. With that, Cordelia's smear campaign collapsed under the weight of official support. My reputation, once her target, became immune to her poisonous rumors. But the woman's response proved how far madness can drive someone losing control. She filed emergency foreclosure actions against my home, using forged legal documents that accused me of posing a community security threat requiring immediate property seizure. The home Marina and I had built together. The one place where our daughter Sage found safety after her mother's death became Cordelia's final target. It wasn't about property anymore. It was psychological warfare. She wanted to erase the last trace of our family's peace and sell it off like she'd done to a dozen other households. That's when federal escalation triggered. Attempting to steal a sitting police chief's residence through falsified filings while already under active investigation qualified as obstruction of justice and aggravated witness intimidation. Within hours, federal prosecutors mobilized. The sound of Cordelia's empire cracking echoed through every corrupt document, every falsified signature, every shell account linked to her name. Each photograph she'd taken of violators was reclassified as stalking evidence. Every fraudulent citation became a count of mail fraud. Every privacy breach evolved into another line item in a federal indictment. She'd made the fatal mistake of thinking fear could silence law enforcement. But I understood that patience and evidence always win against desperation and deceit. Cordelia's downfall came with cinematic irony. Her final act of delusion was straight out of a crime satire. She actually hired paid actors to impersonate police officers and arrest me for fabricated community violations. She believed fake cops could intimidate a real one. She even printed counterfeit warrants, staged vehicles with flashing lights, and rehearsed dialogue meant to humiliate me publicly. But this time, her theater performance had an audience she didn't expect. Federal agents, real officers, and multiple recording devices capturing everything in perfect, prosecutable detail. Our operation was flawless. Hidden teams of officers positioned themselves throughout the block, surveillance vehicles stationed discreetly in driveways and intersections, cameras ready to capture the sting. Every transmission from Cordelia's fake task force was monitored in real time by the FBI's cybercrime division. Mrs. Chen, with her decades of prosecutorial insight, coordinated our witness briefing strategy to ensure no defense could manipulate testimony later. Every resident who'd suffered under Cordelia's rule had been briefed, quietly, carefully, and ready to testify. But before the final strike, Cordelia tried to poison public opinion one last time. She spread malicious gossip through neighborhood group chats and local news leaks, claiming I was on the verge of termination and mentally unstable after my wife's death. The objective was transparent: destroy my credibility before the sting. Yet each lie she spread simply became another example of her pattern of targeted harassment, strengthening the eventual prosecution file. Then came the financial blitzkrieg. She initiated emergency liens against 6 households, all long-time resistors, using fabricated violations to justify immediate property seizures. Mrs. Chen, Hank Morrison, the Williams family, and 3 others faced losing their homes in 72 hours unless they paid emergency community compliance fees. It was extortion dressed in legal costume. But Cordelia didn't realize that we already had the ultimate weapon: proof. My surveillance cameras had captured her staging the entire fake arrest scene days earlier. The footage showed her directing her hired actors, adjusting fake badges, demonstrating how to apply handcuffs for realism, and rehearsing lines about non-compliant community threats. The audacity would have been comical if it weren't so dangerous. When federal prosecutors reviewed the recordings, they described it as the most bizarre evidence of organized HOA fraud ever documented. Search warrants were finalized across 3 states for her home, her office, her corporate shell fronts, and her offshore financial accounts. At the same time, Anonymous threats began arriving at the homes of witnesses. Typed letters warning of severe consequences for cooperating with investigators. Those threats, traced to her communications network, triggered additional federal civil rights and witness intimidation charges. As forensic accountants untangled her money trail, they discovered dozens of fake LLCs, fraudulent bank licenses, and cross-state wire transfers that linked directly to an organized racketeering operation. My vindication arrived officially when State Internal Affairs closed their review of Cordelia's false accusations. Their report cleared my name entirely and praised the professionalism with which I'd handled a criminal enterprise operating under the illusion of legality. Every fabricated complaint she'd filed had become proof of her obsession and guilt. The timing couldn't have been more poetic. It all culminated on a quiet Friday evening, the eve of her downfall. Sage was with me in the garage, the sweet scent of honeysuckle drifting through the open door as we worked on the Mustang's engine. She smiled at me, grease on her hands, her expression soft but perceptive. "You seem lighter, Dad," she said. "Like you again." She was right. Somewhere between grief and justice, I had found peace again. Marina's dream, our home, our purpose, was being protected not just by me but by the truth itself. Unmarked vehicles idled invisibly down the street. Agents checked communication lines. The tension in the air felt like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I slipped a real pair of handcuffs into my jacket pocket. Not for show, but for closure. Saturday morning would end it. Cordelia Peyton Hayes, self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, would face the reality she'd spent years evading. The woman who'd used power as a weapon against grieving families would meet the force of real justice. The fake police she'd hired would be arrested by real ones. Her empire of forged signatures and terrorizing authority would be dismantled in full view of the community she'd once ruled through fear. For the first time in years, the air around our home felt alive again, not with dread, but with the quiet certainty that truth had finally won. Cordelia Peyton Hayes had chosen the wrong battlefield, the wrong family, and the absolute worst opponent for her empire of deceit. This time, her empire of control was about to fall apart, brick by fraudulent brick. Saturday afternoon arrived bathed in golden sunlight, the kind of peaceful weekend that almost feels sacred. Sage and I were on the patio flipping burgers, laughing about her college essays, when two figures in uniform appeared at the end of our driveway. Their strides were confident, their badges shining, at least what looked like badges. Chief Garrett Blackwell, the lead impersonator, carried himself like a seasoned officer. His partner, a burly man with mirrored sunglasses, held a clipboard and a stack of papers pretending to be arrest warrants. Chief Blackwood, one of them, barked. "You're under arrest for gross misconduct, property destruction, and multiple community violations." The false authority in their tone could have fooled anyone. Sage's laughter vanished. The spatula slipped from her hand. She stared at them, her teenage eyes wide with fear. I raised my hands calmly, hiding the flicker of anger that threatened to surface. "Gentlemen," I said evenly, "there must be a mistake. I'm just spending time with my daughter." "No mistake," the actor replied, gesturing toward the papers. "You've abused your position for personal gain." The trap was sprung. Hidden cameras rolled silently from every angle. My supposed humiliation was about to become Cordelia's public destruction. Around us, blinds shifted. Curtains twitched. Neighbors, our witnesses, peered out, ready for the finale. Mrs. Chen stood on her porch, phone in hand, live streaming the entire charade to an audience that would soon include federal prosecutors. When they snapped the plastic cuffs around my wrists, pretending to read me my rights, Sage gasped. Her voice trembled. "Dad, this isn't real, right?" I gave the subtle signal. A brief adjustment to my earpiece. Within seconds, chaos unfolded. "Police! Don't move!" Detective Riley Thornton emerged from behind a parked SUV, weapon drawn, badge gleaming. Two more uniformed officers stepped out of concealment, guns holstered but ready. The fake cops froze mid, performance, the color draining from their faces. And then, right on cue, a sleek white Mercedes roared around the corner, tires screeching against the pavement. Cordelia had arrived, expecting triumph. Instead, she drove directly into the center of a federal sting. From an unmarked vehicle stepped FBI agent Sarah Martinez, credentials raised, voice calm but commanding. "Cordelia Piton Hayes," she declared, "you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, impersonation of law enforcement, and organized criminal activity." Cordelia's face drained of color. "What? This is a misunderstanding. This is just a neighborhood issue," she sputtered. "Mom," I said, flashing my real badge for the gathering crowd, "you've just committed several federal felonies on live video. You're finished." The reaction from the neighborhood was explosive. Cheers, laughter, tears of relief. People who had been afraid to step outside now filled the street, celebrating their freedom. Mrs. Chen's livestream racked up thousands of views within minutes. The neighborhood that had been silenced by years of intimidation now erupted with the sound of justice finally served. Cordelia tried to maintain her composure, but as real agents replaced her fake officers, her delusion crumbled. "You can't do this!" she screamed. "I own this community." Mrs. Chen's voice carried across the crowd. "Correction, Cordelia. You never filed legal election records. You own nothing." Local reporters arrived moments later, filming as federal agents escorted Cordelia into custody. News vans lined the street. Residents, once victims, became heroes of the evening broadcast. Search warrants were executed across multiple counties that same hour. Investigators uncovered more than 180 $1,000 in stolen HOA funds, counterfeit badges, falsified financial ledgers, and digital evidence linking Cordelia to at least 3 similar schemes. Her network of accomplices, security enforcers, forgers, and fake officers, were all rounded up within the next 48 hours. As Sage threw her arms around me, tears streaking her cheeks, she whispered, "Mom would be so proud of you." She was right. Marina's values, truth, fairness, courage, had carried me through the darkest months. Every night spent building the case, every sleepless hour analyzing data, had led to this moment of redemption. The aftermath was electric. The mayor publicly praised our work, issuing a commendation for exceptional integrity in dismantling criminal exploitation disguised as neighborhood authority. The police department honored the case as a model of community-driven justice. By sundown, Willowbrook Estates was celebrating. Residents poured into the streets, grilling food, playing music, sharing stories of the years they'd spent afraid. For the first time, it truly felt like freedom. Cordelia's final words, before being driven away, were haunting in their irony. "I had everything under control. But power built on deceit never lasts when truth is relentless." 8 months later, justice hit her like a freight train. Federal court sentenced her to 8 years in prison for $340,000 restitution and a lifetime ban from holding any HOA-related position. All fraudulent foreclosures were voided, homes restored to their rightful owners. The courtroom erupted in quiet satisfaction as she was led away in cuffs. Mrs. Chen sat proudly in the front row, her lifelong pursuit of justice written across her face like victory itself. Willowbrook Estates reinvented itself completely. The old HOA dissolved in weeks. A new, transparent community board formed, democratically elected, accountable, and genuinely dedicated to residents. Mrs. Chen became its president, implementing federal-level oversight to ensure no one could ever exploit the system again. The atmosphere transformed. Children played freely, neighbors shared meals, and front lawns bloomed where fear had once taken root. Sage noticed the change in me before anyone else. "You're lighter, Dad," she said one evening, wiping grease from her hands as we worked on the Mustang. "You smile again." It was true. Justice had given me back something I thought grief had stolen: purpose. Our garage, once filled with sorrow, became a gathering place. Neighbors joined the restoration project, bringing tools, food, and laughter. What Cordelia had called a violation had turned into the heartbeat of a united community. My recognition soon followed. First, a state award for community protection, then an invitation from the FBI to consult on HOA fraud investigations nationwide. We used recovered funds to build a victims assistance program, offering legal aid and counseling to families who'd been exploited. Financial advisors volunteered to teach residents how to recognize scams and demand transparency. Education became our strongest defense. The Marina Blackwood Memorial Scholarship was created soon after, awarding criminal justice students who aimed to protect communities the way Marina once dreamed we would. Her belief that good people must never surrender to corruption now lived on in every student funded through that program. A year later, during our first Community Protection Day, the transformation was undeniable. Sunset lit the neighborhood in gold and rose, laughter spilling from every porch. Sage stood proudly beside the restored Mustang, teaching local kids about engines. Mrs. Chen offered legal guidance over lemonade, while Hank Morrison's American flag fluttered on his porch. No longer illegal, but honored. The hum of unity replaced the drone of patrol carts. The sweet scent of grilled food mixed with honeysuckle from Mrs. Chen's garden, where Harold's roses bloomed brilliantly. For once, every porch light meant safety, not surveillance. When new residents asked about our story, we told them proudly. This neighborhood faced corruption, and we fought back with truth, law, and each other. Cordelia Peaton Hayes thought she could enslave a community through fear and greed. Instead, she forged something stronger: neighbors who would never again be silent victims. Have you ever battled an HOA nightmare that seemed unbeatable? Share your story in the comments. You might help someone else escape the same trap. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because next week we'll dive into the shocking story of a woman who turned her neighbor's illegal Airbnb empire into a federal tax evasion case that shook an entire rental network. Trust me, you'll want to hear this one.